So, good evening. My name is Scott Carpenter. I'm the superintendent of schools here for Monomoy. I appreciate all the parents that have come out tonight, but more than anything, I appreciate our peer leaders who are sitting up here in the front, who tonight will actually share their data from the Youth Risk Behavior Survey from this past June when our high school students took the survey. It's been a neat opportunity for me to go and work with them, and you can imagine some of the topics that they're going to cover are pretty heavy ones, and I really admire their bravery and courage to get up in front and actually speak about these topics with their peers, but then to turn around that evening or tonight and to speak about it with parents is pretty admirable. There is a lot of information that you're going to get barraged by in about just over an hour, and there will be slides that you'll say, oh, I'd like to take a little more time and look at that graph. Tomorrow, all the slides that are going to be up here and all of the talking points that the students have will go up on the website, so you can have access and go back in and see all of that data and sort of read it over and sort of go through it at a little bit of a slower pace. But what we want to do tonight is have a chance to have our students present the data to you, and then to take another half an hour afterwards or so and have it open where they're going to be a panel, and it's your chance as parents to get some insights from them in terms of what life is like as a teen here at Monomoy. So I will turn things over to Principal Burkhead to get us started off.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome. I want to thank Dr. Carpenter for all his efforts in this matter. As I'll be sharing with you, we're one of the few, if not the only, schools on Cape Cod, maybe as far north as Boston, that shares this information publicly and has the courage to have conversations about it. And I think that's the most important thing we'll accomplish tonight, is to begin these conversations after sharing this important data. I also want to thank our peer leadership group that's worked really hard at this. This is some strong information. They've been very valiant in their efforts putting this together, organizing this, and then presenting live tonight. It's a big deal for them, so I want to thank you all personally. It's awesome. So the first slide here. Monomoy students in grade 8 through 12 were invited in June of 19 to participate in the Youth Risk Behavior Survey, which covered topics on substance abuse and use, sexual activity and dating violence, depression and suicide, violence and bullying, and support structures teens may have in their lives. Most of the questions asked, if you had to be taking part in a potentially risky behavior in the past month, the past year, or during your lifetime. Survey data is compared in this presentation between 2019 data and Monomoy's previous 2014 and 2016 youth risk behavior data results. Community can address children's risky behavior and measure progress without assessing and understanding what the risks are. Problems also won't get better unless we are bold enough to engage in difficult conversations. Monomoy is unique among Cape schools, both in our transparent approach to openly share the full results of our youth risk behavior data and in maintaining a commitment to biannually conducting this survey, publicly sharing the results, developing plans to address concerns, and implementing these plans. Thanks to the efforts of Sheila House, who's in the house tonight, Howard's Youth and Family Services Director, she was able to obtain a grant from Monomoy to participate in the survey. The town of Howard should be commended for its progressive thinking of having a Youth and Family Services Director for the town. Ms. House is an integral part of the safety net protecting our youth year-round and often collaborates with schools to develop programming to protect our children. So thank you, Ms. House. By allowing students to opt out and reviewing each survey for consistency, The Youth Risk Behavior Survey is considered to be a reliable tool for assessing levels of risky behavior and overall trends. The consistency of participation rates and the relatively large sample size, in conjunction with the data review and cleaning done, results in reliable information to use and review. The above selection of findings highlighted both some of the positive findings within our Youth Risk Behavior Survey as well as some of the more troubling trends. This provides a window into the range of topics covered over the next 100 slides. It's important to note that while we use state or national averages as comparisons, our goal is to bring risky behavior as low as possible and well below state or national levels. Our hope is that by understanding what the risks are, you will acknowledge problems, care enough to protect our youth, and join us in taking action to make our children safer. Now I'll invite our first peer leaders up to present.
Hi, my name is Connor DeVoe. I'm a senior.
Hi, I'm Sam Chase, and I'm also a senior.
We're starting off with substance abuse. So we'll start off with the lifetime use summary. Monomoy High School students in grades 9 to 12 have a lower use of alcohol and tobacco than the state average. The use of marijuana and vape products is slightly higher than the state average. The use of most other hard drugs is below or at national or state averages. Understanding the frequency of substance abuse among teens can be helpful in social norming risky behavior. A child may believe that everybody is smoking pot, for example, yet this isn't the Monomoy norm. In reality, most Monomoy students, 58%, in grades 9 to 12 have never even tried marijuana. Lifetime use summary. While it's reassuring that the percentages for Monomoy are largely lower than or close to the state averages, looking at the actual number of students that these figures represent is important to understand. Tobacco and vaping. So, tobacco use comparison. Lifetime use of tobacco in the past 30 days, use of chewing tobacco, and use of cigar products is significantly below state and national levels for Monomoy grade 9 to 12 students. Note, throughout this slide deck, comparisons are made between Monomoy, Massachusetts, and the national data. The color scheme of yellow, blue, and green, respectively, is always used. Tobacco use. There was a significant reduction in tobacco use in grades 9 to 12 from 2014 to 2016, and now the 2019 survey. Note, throughout this slide deck, when comparisons are made between the 2014, 2016, and 2019 Youth Risk Behavior Survey, the color scheme of light blue, blue, and dark blue, respectively, is always used. Tobacco use in the past 30 days by grade. There's a general trend that older students are more likely to smoke tobacco in the past 30 days, though you can see there is a steep decline in the 2019 results for grade 12 students. Vaping use comparison. Vaping, the use of electronic cigarettes, is a new technology and was not a topic on the 2014 Youth Risk Behavior Survey, and minimally covered on the 2016 survey. In 2016, Monomoy students had a slightly lesser use of vaping than the state or national averages, and by the 2019 survey, that was increased to slightly over the state and national averages. In reality, the substances that can be used in these vaping devices range from nicotine-free juice to liquids and much higher nicotine levels than cigarettes to solutions containing THC. the psychoactive component of marijuana. As it is challenging to determine exactly what substance is being vaped, students with vape products on campus are addressed by the administration as if the contents of the vaping device contain THC. All students caught vaping lose jobs and privileges and are required to attend an 8-week vaping reduction class.
Vaping use. There was an increase in vaping in grades 9 through 12 from 2016 to 2019 survey, resulting in one of the more concerning takeaways from this year's survey. Younger students in grade 8 and 9 saw the largest increase in vaping between 2016 and 2018, while our seniors and to a lesser extent juniors reported large increase in use of vape products since 2016. Over past administrations of the YRBS, males tend to use tobacco, alcohol, and other substances use in greater numbers than females. When it comes to the occasional use of vape products by Monomoy students, the pattern is reversed. Females are more likely to have vaped in the past 30 days, while males are more likely to vape on a daily basis. Vaping requires equipment including the device itself as well as cartridges. Some come in many different flavors, which can also contain THC/marijuana or converted to do so. Massachusetts law states that the sale and distribution of electronic smoking devices to people under the age of 21 is prohibited. Young people, therefore, find many other ways to obtain this product. Few of our students are buying the vape products themselves. Generally, someone else is buying the vape products, or they are using friends' vaping devices. There is a huge impact of students' beliefs regarding the perception of others. If students believe that their peers and family think an activity is wrong, they will be less likely to participate in it. If students have been exposed to information that the use of substances is risky, they will be less likely to use those substances. The percentage of students using tobacco has been in steep decline in recent years, in part because of extensive public service announcements on television and messaging coming from home that tobacco use is harmful. Students generally think their parents believe vaping is less wrong than using tobacco. Teenagers' perceptions that using tobacco is harmful are sustained well above the 85% level across grades.
Hi, I'm Maggie Dever, I'm a junior.
And I'm Emma Sullivan, and I'm a senior.
And we're going to be presenting the information about alcohol. Alcohol use comparison. Monomoy grades 9 through 12 lifetime alcohol use and use in the past 30 days are below state and national averages, although very slightly for student use in the past 30 days. Monomoy students in grade 9 through 12 engage in binge drinking at higher rates than their peers in Massachusetts and the nation. Binge drinking was described in the survey as having 5 or more drinks of alcohol in a row, that is, within a couple of hours. Alcohol use. Lifetime alcohol use and binge drinking in the past 30 days have both decreased for Monomoy students since the 2014 and 2016 surveys. Alcohol use in the past 30 days. Of concern, alcohol use in the past 30 days has increased in 9th and 10th graders. Alcohol use in the past 30 days has decreased for 11th and 12th graders. Binge drinking in the past 30 days. On the positive side, binge drinking has decreased for most grade levels since 2016.
Alcohol use and binge drinking in the past 30 days by gender. As with the vaping data, the conventional wisdom is that boys engage in more risky behaviors and use alcohol more than girls. Unlike the past youth risk behavior survey, the 2019 data indicates that Monomoy girls are both using alcohol in the past 30 days more than boys. The past 30 days trends represent good news in that both driving after drinking and riding with a driver who had been drinking continue to decrease from 2014 to 2019. Drinking and driving in the past 30 days trends. Where did student drinkers usually get their alcohol? Largely from their parents. In some cases, older siblings or older friends are buying the alcohol, but much of the alcohol our students drink comes from their own parents' supply at home. This alcohol then shows up at parties and is shared with friends. Students' belief matters. Again, the more that students have the perception that their peers or parents believe something is wrong, the less likely they are to participate in it. Whereas teens' perceptions that tobacco use was harmful hovered well above 85%, their perception that having 5 or more drinks once or twice a week is less than this and falls well below 80% by junior year.
Hi everybody, my name is Julie Slade. I am a senior and I am going to be doing the presentation on marijuana. So we're going to start with marijuana use comparison. Of notable concern is that Monomoy grade 9 through 12 student use of marijuana in one's lifetime and use in the past 30 days are above both the state and national averages. First use before age 13 is right at the state average and below the national average. The reported age of first use for grades 9 through 12 is, on average, about 14.71 years of age. Marijuana use. There has been an increase in marijuana use in grades 9 through 12 since the 2016 survey, nearing the 2014 levels. First use before age 13 has continued to decrease. While marijuana use in the past 30 days is generally lower than the 2014 levels, it has increased significantly over the 2016 numbers. It is important to know that this question was not asked to 8th graders in 2014 or 2016. And by gender, marijuana use in the past 30 days among our male students is slightly higher than among our female students at 27% and 24% respectively. Marijuana use in driving. The number of students reporting that they have driven after using marijuana is slightly lower than the state and national averages. 24% of students report that they had ridden with a driver who had been using marijuana. This is much higher than the 15% of students reporting being riders in a car driven by somebody who had been drinking. There is no state or national data available for the road with a driver who had been using marijuana in the past 30 days for comparison. How did their students get their marijuana? Students obtain marijuana from the expected sources, friends, at parties, or buying it from somebody. 2 response options on the survey were getting marijuana from home without permission and getting it somewhere else without permission. None of our students reported taking their marijuana without someone's permission. 6% report getting it from home with a family member with their permission. And students' beliefs matter. The greater degree to which students believe that their peers and parents consider an activity to be wrong, the less likely they will be to participate in it. This reiterates the importance of parent messaging and of positive peer pressure. While 80% or more of students in each grade believe that drinking 5 or more drinks of alcohol once or twice a week was harmful, only 60% of 8th graders perceive smoking marijuana 1 to 2 times a week just as harmful. This percentage gradually drops off to 33% by senior year. There's a similar decline in students' perceptions that their parents and peers think smoking marijuana is wrong from grade 8 to senior year. And I'm also going to be presenting the section on prescription medication, other drugs, and distribution. The abuse of other drugs and substances in one's lifetime. The good news here is that Monomoy students are reporting lower use of these heavier categories of drugs than the state or national average. While the overall percentages are low, this still represents a less than ideal number of students, and we'd like those numbers to go even lower. Inhalant use is the only category where Monomoy teens were above the state average. When students' parents were coming of age, the inhalant use everyone was warned about was glue sniffing. Today, some teens are making the risky decision to inhale the vapors from volatile chemicals contained in small brown glass vials, often labeled as liquid incense or leather cleaner, and that are available in some area convenience stores. Abuse of other drugs and substances in one's lifetime. For many of the heavier drugs, the use is down since 2014 and 2016 for grades 9 through 12. These heavier drugs include cocaine, ecstasy, methamphetamines, inhalants, and needle use. However, there is a slight uptick in cocaine use, though still a very low percentage, and inhalant use remained at the same level as 2016. Use of prescription drugs not prescribed to the student in the past 30 days. The Youth Risk Behavior Survey asked students how many times they have used prescription drugs not prescribed to them. In 2019, the number of students who are using prescription drugs not prescribed to them is lower than the state average. The concern has largely centered around the misuse of prescription painkillers, which has been linked to individuals moving on to opioids and becoming part of the opioid crisis facing our country. There is no national data available for comparison. When compared to 2014 data, far fewer students are taking medication not prescribed to them, and this question was not asked in 2016. Generally the case, the use of harder drugs is higher for males than for females. And once again, the importance of students' beliefs. Students receive messages from their peers, parents, and family members about the casual use of prescription drugs not prescribed to them. As with the case of use of tobacco products, in which over 85% of students across grade levels believe that tobacco is harmful, prescription misuse is believed to be wrong and harmful at rates even higher than those of tobacco. This is likely why we have seen such a pronounced decline in tobacco use and prescription abuse. For vaping, alcohol, and marijuana, where the products are perceived to be less wrong and harmful, use remains at much higher levels and is often increasing. Percentage of students offered, sold, or given illegal drugs on school property. Students in grades 9 through 12 report that the distribution of illegal drugs at Monomoy schools is slightly lower than the state or national averages. Per our memorandum of understanding with our town's police department, any student distributing drugs on campus will face criminal charges in addition to the school's disciplinary consequences. And students in grade 9 through 12 report that the distribution of illegal drugs at Monomoy schools has decreased from both the 2014 and 2016 surveys.
Hi, my name is Phoebe, and I'm a sophomore, and I'm going to be talking about distracted driving. Distracted driving in the past 30 days. Of tremendous concern, more than 60% of our students who drive report texting while driving in the past 30 days. This is significantly higher than the national average, and the risk is alarming. From national studies, we know 21% of teen drivers involved in fatal accidents were distracted by their cell phones, and 1 out of every 4 car accidents in the United States is caused by texting and driving. Texting and driving is 6 times more likely to cause an accident than driving drunk. Distracted driving in the past 30 days, broken down by year. The number of students reporting texting while driving has increased dramatically from both the 2014 and 2016 surveys. Twice as many teens are texting while driving in 2019 compared to the previous Youth Risk Behavior Survey in 2016. Teens talking on the phone while driving appears to have increased slightly since 2014. As a student, this is particularly surprising because kids don't seem to communicate through phone calls and primarily rely on texting. Another factor of the increase in distracted driving is the lack of consequences students seem to face.
My name is Caitlin. I'm a senior, and today I will be talking about nutrition, body image, and physical activity. More than a third of Monomoy boys and a quarter of girls eat breakfast every day. Girls are less likely to eat breakfast every day and more likely to not eat breakfast at all, with 20% of girls never eating breakfast. how often students went to bed hungry due to lack of food in the past 30 days. 8% of Monomoy students report sometimes or most of the time going to bed hungry because of lack of food in their homes. Food insecurity is a concern in every school community and an increasing concern here at Monomoy as the number of students and families qualifying for free and reduced lunch increases. The percent of Monomoy High School students currently qualifying for free and reduced lunch is 39% and even higher at our elementary schools. Monomoy students' perception of their weight. About half of Monomoy students perceive their weight to be about right. Girls were somewhat more likely to perceive themselves as slightly overweight, and boys were somewhat more likely to perceive themselves as slightly underweight. What students report to be doing about their weight in the past 30 days. Nearly 20% of Monomoy students fasted for 24 hours or more to lose weight, far above the state average. This is concerning as fasting extensively can negatively affect the health of teenagers. And then we broke it down by gender. As girls are more likely to attempt to lose weight, they are far more likely than boys to engage in concerning and harmful means to do so. And the frequency of having 60 minutes of physical activity in the past week. Our boys are more likely than girls to be physically active for at least 60 minutes a day, 5 or more days a week. At the other extreme, girls are more likely to report not being physically active over 60 minutes in the past week.
Hi, I'm Sarah Babb. I'm a senior. I'm Jenna Greco. I'm also a senior and will be presenting sexual behavior and unwanted sexual contact and dating violence. Sexual orientation. The majority of Monomoy students report their sexual orientation as heterosexual. Monomoy's sexual orientation percentages mirror the state averages, where 10% of high school students in Massachusetts identify as being lesbian, gay, or bisexual. 2% of both Monomoy and Massachusetts high school students, grades 9 through 12, identify as being transgender.
Percent of students reporting having had sexual intercourse in their lifetime. The percentage of Monomoy students in grades 9 through 12 reporting having had sexual intercourse in their lifetime is above state and national averages.
Percent of students reporting having had sexual intercourse in their lifetime. The percentage of Monomoy students in grades 9 through 12 who report having had sexual intercourse in their lifetimes has increased significantly over both the 2016 and 2014 surveys. 55% of Monomoy students in grades 9 through 12 have never had sexual intercourse.
As would be expected, the number of students engaging in sexual intercourse increases with the student's age. By junior year, the number of students who have had sexual intercourse exceeds through those who have not.
Age at first sexual intercourse. Of those Monomoy High School students who have had sexual intercourse, age 15 is the most common age for first sexual activity.
Number of sexual partners in the past 3 months. A vast majority of Monomoy students have either not had sex or had only one sex partner in the past 3 months.
Of sexually active teens, those having sexual intercourse with 4 or more partners in lifetime. The number of Monomoy students who report having sexual intercourse with 4 or more partners is higher than state average and is just above the national average.
Pregnancy prevention method used the last time students had sexual intercourse. For those having sex, condoms are the most common form of birth control. 10.5 either used no method of birth control or were not sure if their partner was using birth control. It is troubling that 1 in 10 students may not be using birth control.
Percentage of sexually active students who have been pregnant or gotten someone pregnant. Of those sexually active students, 4% of students report having been pregnant or having gotten someone pregnant, with another 4% not sure.
Percentage of sexually active students who have been tested for or contracted a sexually transmitted disease. Of those sexually active students, approximately 3% of them also report having contracted a sexually transmitted disease. More than a third of sexually active students report having been tested for STDs, and more than a fifth have been tested for HIV.
Percentage of sexually active students using drugs or alcohol before last sexual intercourse. Of real concern, the percentage of Monomoy students who reported using drugs or alcohol before their last sexual intercourse is higher than both the state and national averages, and this percentage has increased from 10% in 2014 to 22% in 2019.
Have discussed sexuality and/or STD pregnancy prevention with parents or other adult family members in the past year. Nearly half of the students responded that their parents have never discussed sexuality with them, while only 40% of our students in grades 9 through 12 have had a parent talk to them about sex in the past year. This is better than the 39% of students getting this advice from parents statewide.
Unwanted sexual contact and dating violence. Sexual contact against will, comparison, and lifetime. Of significant concern in the Monomoy Youth Risk Behavior Survey results was the frequency of students reporting to be physically forced to have intercourse or do other sexual acts. There is a need to reinforce what consent means with our teens and to clearly convey that forcing another into sexual contact is criminal and can result in a student being charged with rape and/or assault. Our students in grades 9 through 12 were below the state average for this data point, but above the national average. Correlated to this graph is the fact that Monomoy students who reported using drugs or alcohol before their last sexual intercourse is higher than both the state and national averages and has increased from prior surveys.
Sexual contact against will, comparison, and lifetime by gender. When broken down by gender, girls report a far higher rate of unwanted sexual contact than boys. 15% of girls in grades 9 through 12 have experienced sexual contact against their will in their lifetime, versus only 3% for boys.
Comparing the percentages of girls who have experienced sexual contact against their will in their lifetime, all girls, versus those who have had sexual intercourse. The rate of unwanted sexual contact seen in Monomoy's 2019 Youth Risk Behavior Survey mirrors larger state and national trends. What isn't clear from the question asked is what types of unwanted sexual contact were the girls receiving and how often. When unpacking the data from our 2019 Youth Risk Behavior Survey, we found that for girls in grades 8 through 12 who have not had sexual intercourse in their lifetime, only 6%, 10 of 162 girls, had reported being victims of sexual contact against their will. By comparison, for girls who have had sexual intercourse in their lifetime, the frequency of sexual contact against their will increases fivefold to 29%, 25 of 61 girls. In 2016, the Youth Risk Behavior Survey did not ask about unwanted sexual contact. Rather, it specifically asked if students had been forced in their lifetime to have sexual intercourse. The rate at which this has been reported of Monomoy's 2016 Youth Risk Behavior Survey mirrored the national high school, grades 9 through 12, rate of 7%. When specifically looking at the rate, this was happening for girls. 8.3% of Monomoy girls in grades 9 through 12 responded that they had been forced to have intercourse. We can't lose sight that a significant portion of the girls in the 2019 Youth Risk Behavior Survey who have both had sexual intercourse and who were sexually contacted against their will may have been victims of forced sexual intercourse. A related report was recently released by the Center of Disease Control, noting that 1 in 16 women, 16%, report that their first sexual experience of sexual intercourse was rape. Clearly, this is a societal issue and needs attention locally and nationally.
Victim of dating violence in lifetime. Of the Monomoy students who date, 7% report being physically hurt by the person they were dating. This is lower than the national average but higher than the state average. Only 24.6% of Monomoy students have ever been on a date. Of students who have dated, percentage who have been hurt by someone they dated. In keeping with similar data points, far greater numbers of girls report being victims of dating violence. Of the girls who have dated, 1 in 5 report being victims of dating violence.
My name is David Malone, and I'll be presenting bullying, fighting, and violence. Students reporting carrying weapons in past 30 days comparison. In good news, the numbers of Monomoy students reporting carrying weapons is lower than the state and national averages for all categories. No Monomoy students have been found to be in possession of guns at our schools. Students reporting carrying weapons in past 30-day trends. While nearly 8% of students reported carrying weapons in the past year, only about 1% reported doing so at school. These numbers are decreasing from both 2014 and 2016. Bullying and threats to safety comparison. The reported frequency and impact of bullying at Monomoy is in keeping with state averages and lower than national averages. fighting comparison. Physical fighting of students is significantly lower than the state and national averages.
I'm Caitlin Lyons, I'm a senior, and today I will be talking about depression and suicide. Depression, self-harm, and suicidal behavior in the past year by comparison. Depression in the Youth Risk Behavior Survey is described in the question feeling sad or hopeless almost every day for 2 weeks or more in a row, to the point that the students stop doing some of their usual activities. More than a third of Monomoy students, grades 9 through 12, report feeling depressed in the past year. Alarmingly, this is higher than both the state and national average. Depression, self-harm, and suicidal behavior trends. In most categories, Monomoy students showed improvements over the 2014 and 2016 Youth Risk Behavior Survey results. However, the 2019 results show a dramatic increase in the reported incidence of depression, which is extremely concerning. Clearly, there's the need for additional supports for our youth and to understand what is causing these increased feelings of sadness and hopelessness. Depression, self-harm, and suicidal behavior comparison by gender. In every category surveyed, our female students report higher levels of depression, self-harm, and suicidal ideation. This is a pattern that cannot be ignored. Past year depression and suicide attempt. When the survey percentages are shared as actual numbers, the true impact of this challenge is clear. Hundreds of Monomoy students are reporting feelings of depression, saying that they felt sad or hopeless every day for 2 weeks or more in the past year. Nearly 50 of our students contemplated suicide, and 18 reported that they had attempted suicide. Thankfully, none of these attempts were successful. While we have greatly reduced the suicide ideation over the past 4 years, we have room for improvement. To make effective headway here, we need to address the root causes of depression, which has been escalating since the 2016 Youth Risk Behavior Survey. And next we move on to protective factors. Percent of students with adult family members they can talk to about things that are important to them. More than 85% of Monomoy students report having an adult family member they can talk to about important things. The converse over this adult connection is truly troublesome, in that 10% of our students feel that they do not have this support structure in their lives, and the remaining 5% were unsure if there's an adult family member they can talk to about things that are important to them. The frequency of family dinners. As a measure of connectedness, data was gathered on the number of students who reported having dinners with family. Of concern is that nearly a quarter of students report never having dinner together as a family in the past week. Percent of students feeling that teachers really care about them and give them encouragement and support. The adult connection is an important factor in students' well-being and their success at school. While a majority of students, 62%, report feeling that their teachers really care for them, we would like to see that percentage be much higher. Our goal at Monomoy is to achieve 100% of students feeling cared for and having adults in their lives who they can talk to about important things. The emphasis on themes like You Are Important and Home Away from Home, as well as the utilization of our seminar block at the middle school and Jossamauer at the high school, are Monomoy's efforts to better connect students with teachers in hopes that all children will have an adult in their lives with whom they can talk to about important things. While these initiatives help improve student and adult connectedness, the Youth Risk Behavior Survey clearly shows that we have room for improvement.
So I know that was a lot of information, 90 slides in just under 40 minutes. As I said, they'll all be present on the website tomorrow, so you have the opportunity to go back and look at each individual slide, and if you want, and just take more time to digest it. So what we'd like to do is slow things down a little bit and sort of start to transition into a conversation. So one of the things that we've tried to do over the last several years with the survey is start to look at the students' responses to certain questions and say, okay, what messages are parents sending them, and how are those messages being internalized and acted upon by students? Because oftentimes we've reached the end of a youth risk behavior presentation, and parents are saying, okay, now what? What can I do? So here's some quick advice from what the data is saying. If you recall during the presentation on each of the substances, there was a graph that had all sorts of bars on a student's perception of whether using the substance was wrong or very wrong. And one of those bars on the graph was what they thought their parents' perception of the harm was, and or whether their parents were perceiving that using the substance was wrong or very wrong. So if we look at vaping and the percentage of students who see or perceive that their parents see vaping as wrong or very wrong, we see only 21% of the students saying that they have actually vaped in the last 30 days, compared to students who perceive their parents don't see vaping as wrong or very wrong, and we're seeing almost twice as many students actually using vape products. And that same thing moves on to the messages we send about alcohol. So if students believe that alcohol use, or that their parents consider alcohol use wrong or very wrong, we see 28% of the students saying that they used alcohol in the last 30 days, and a number almost double that use alcohol in the last 30 days if they perceive their parents considering alcohol not wrong or only a little bit wrong. So I was talking before the presentation with Principal Burkhead and Jen Police, and I'd like to maybe invite them to share some perspectives from the trenches in terms of what parents at times may be sending a signal in terms of what a maybe not so strong message is. Because as a former high school administrator, I've heard these too in my shoes, and it's just the challenge of I think sometimes parents are well-intentioned, but the message isn't a wrong or very wrong message.
Testing. Can you all hear me? Yes, we were talking a little bit about this, and as a parent of two children now, one graduated college, one in junior year of college, I deal with a lot of the same things that you all are dealing with, the conversations that we need to have, and every action we take, and the message it sends to our children. So one of the things we were talking about when I grew up, it was no different. We had the parents that were, well, they can drink at our house, we'll take their keys, at least we know where they're drinking. And I just think that after seeing this data for the last 3 years and just realizing this, that's not the right message. It's still condoning alcohol. And it's not a justification for doing that. Or we'll take their keys and allow them to party here. At least we know where they are at night. And I would argue that teaching the value of not drinking until they're of age is a better way to approach that situation. So those are two examples that you all probably have heard at some point. I know I've heard them. I've had debates with my own colleagues and friends about that. And I just want to share my opinion with that. But based on this data, which is pretty eye-opening, the more you condone, or your actions condone, the allowing of these illicit drugs, the message to the kids is that they're going to use them more. It's very clear.
I think you stole my thunder, but that's okay. But putting on my former guidance counselor hat and working with kids, and especially as they get into their junior and senior year, and they're getting ready to leave us and depart as independent young adults. A common message that I've heard through students is that, my parents would rather me drink with them, so I learn how to drink before I go to college. And I've heard that, and I think it's intended. I think it's well intended, but I think it's the wrong message.
So that's my anecdotal story about parent messages.
So those wrong or very wrong messages extends not just to drinking alcohol, but also binge drinking. So if parents send that message that minors using alcohol is wrong or very wrong, their children are roughly three times less likely to binge drink than those that are sending a sort of not so clear message that it's only a little bit wrong or not wrong at all. And then in terms of, I know many familiar faces here in the audience, and many of us now have kids behind the wheel of a car, and the same data here applies to the likelihood that children will get behind the car after having drank alcohol. So children are 9 times more likely to get behind the wheel of a car after drinking alcohol if their parents are sending a sort of mixed or neutral signal when it comes to alcohol use of minors being wrong or very wrong. And then we have to also keep in mind that we, as the adults, are the example. And this afternoon, we were putting up the data, and one of the students says, "Hey, 8th, 9th, and 10th graders, they're not driving cars." And I said, "You're correct. They're not driving cars, but their parents are, and our children are noticing." And that's, again, those subtle signals that we as parents, are putting out there. So the kids are reporting that, even if they don't drive, they're reporting getting in cars after the driver had been drinking. And in many cases, those drivers were likely their parents. And then we have parent messaging when it comes to marijuana. How strong the signal home is sending with regard to marijuana. And I think this is becoming really complicated for students with marijuana becoming legalized in the state. But students, again, are roughly almost 4 times more likely to use marijuana if they're getting a weak or mixed message when it comes to how wrong marijuana use is. Again, the survey asks for students getting behind the car after smoking marijuana, and again, students who perceive that their parents are sending a strong signal that smoking marijuana is wrong or very wrong are far less likely to get behind the wheel of a car after smoking marijuana. And again, just like with the driving after using alcohol, there are 8th, 9th, and 10th graders who aren't driving yet, reporting that they, at times in this graph, roughly 15% of them in the last 30 days are saying that they've gotten in a car as a passenger with a driver who's been smoking marijuana. And lastly, prescription abuse. Prescription abuse, again, is one of those things that has really dropped off a great deal in this survey, which is a great thing. But still, the messages parents are sending when it comes to prescription abuse, your child is almost 4 times more likely to abuse prescriptions if that signal that's coming from home is weak. And then if we turn to the questions when it comes to depression and suicidality, if students have family members that they can talk to when it comes to important things, they are far less likely to report in the last year as being depressed, and again, far less likely to report in the past year that they attempted suicide. And lastly, I think one of the things that the survey data is clearly telling us is that we need to have different types of conversations. Well, first of all, I think the survey data is saying we need to have conversations with our children about sex. According to the survey, roughly half of our children are saying in the last year, nobody at home has talked to us about sexuality in any way, shape, or form. But the survey data is clearly saying that we need to have these conversations, and we need to have these conversations perhaps include very different information when it comes to our young girls and our young boys. I mean, there's some clear signals in the survey that our boys need to better understand the meaning of consent and boundaries, but also that our boys should understand what they can proactively do as young men to protect others, including young women. And our girls need to better understand how they can protect their own safety and their own personal boundaries. So these are heavy topics. They're complex ones, and they are not things that the school alone can fix. And I'll provide one example of a complexity that sort of links together information from slides that you've already seen. That for me is one of those troubling, things that that involves the need for schools and home to both address. We saw in the data that depression has spiked. Our depression rates here at Monomoy since the last time the Youth Risk Behavior Survey were given are up by 50%. We know from the Youth Risk Behavior Survey that our young ladies are struggling more with that depression than our young men. We've seen something really unique in this survey compared to any youth risk behavior survey that I've done for the last 20 years, and that's that we're seeing our young women using substances, using alcohol in this case, at a higher frequency than young men, and we're seeing our young ladies binge drinking at a higher frequency than our young men. And as one of the student presenters pointed out, we also see an increase in the number of our students who are using alcohol before they're having sex. And then we see, this just completely unacceptable bar there that while it's gone down since the last administration of the Youth Risk Behavior Survey, it's still way too high when it comes to the number of our young women that are experiencing sexual contact against their will. Again, it's like, as a school district, we have the students for 180 days for our high school students, between the roughly 8 o'clock and 3 o'clock, and then they go home, and then they're with the parents for over 180 days in a year. And these are things that that cross over the boundaries of home and school, and it's going to take all of us in this room to go and come up with solutions to address these problems here, along with a variety of others that were raised in this presentation. So what I'd like to do is just transition and invite our student presenters to come up and take a seat as part of our panel. We have members of the school administration here, some of our school counseling staff. We have our illustrious Sheila House with us. We have members of public safety, both police and fire from Harwich and Chatham here to chime in. And I'd like to just sort of open it up to a dialogue about, and invite the parents that are here tonight to ask questions. What did you find troubling in the survey, or maybe direct the questions to the students. But we'll turn it from a presentation to a dialogue.
Any questions?
I was wondering, I don't need them, it's very loud. I was wondering if any of you could speak to what some of your peers, why you think they might be experiencing depression in higher numbers, what might be going on for them without getting into a lot of, obviously personal stuff.
Obviously, there isn't one cause to it. Depression and all types of mental illness present themselves in many different ways and have many different causes. But in general, I would say students probably feel a great pressure now. The world becomes more competitive every day, and college, careers, everything, that's a big pressure. And now we're more connected and we see more of the world through social media, and that's a whole other pressure and a new way you perceive yourself. And does anyone else have any other ideas of how they?
Earlier, someone mentioned when we were practicing this event, somebody mentioned personal family life and specifically interpersonal relationships when it comes to, you know, parents and parental issues. So, and that relates to the drug thing about having an open dialogue with your children and treating them as equals and showing them respect. And personally for me, I think climate change is a big fear on all our heads.
Are any of you worried about your friends having a substance use problem, so an addiction or kind of going up that ladder very quickly?
I think not necessarily with like the harder drugs that were mentioned in it. I don't see personally a lot of use with that. I think with like substance use, the nicotine has been a big issue, and even with all the recent vape bans in the state, the younger kids are still using Juuls, they're vaping, they're doing everything that a lot of the older kids are doing, and I think that it's kind of the responsibility of older kids to step up and be role models and teach them good habits and not those ones.
I personally have watched a couple, very rarely, I think in terms of addiction, real addiction. I think that only happens once, a handful of times, but to watch it happen severely to someone you know is very hard. And I think that kind of spiral happens through a combination of family life and mental health and the types of drugs that a person is addicted to, but it does take a toll on the people around them. And I think that kind of pressure from like your friends to seek help is also a positive good to someone who is in a serious position. Sorry. I think that, adding on to what Julie said, I think that the serious and like the hard drugs aren't so much as an issue as the like vaping. Like vaping, I'd say, is the #1 thing that I worry about personally, like everyone in our school. And as Mr. Carpenter said, like last week, way back when, like cigarettes were seen as like cool. Like if you had a cigarette in your mouth or like in your hands, you were like seen as like cool. And I think that's kind of like what vaping is for a lot of the younger kids. Like when you enter high school, it's new, everything's new, and like you hear about kids vaping and you're like, I want to try that, like I want to be like cool. But it's not cool.
Personally, I've seen a lot of kids in our grade start picking up cigarettes because of what they've seen Juuls like do to people and all the vaping. So I do think that cigarettes are making a comeback. And once you turn 18, you can buy cigarettes. So I think that's like a big thing for people in our age right now.
I think another important part about if you're worried about a friend with a substance use problem that's headed towards the road of addiction is that don't be afraid to say something. Although like you may be afraid they'll be mad at you or you may like kind of part ways after that, it's worth saving a life than losing a friend ultimately. Because one day they'll be grateful for it that someone did something.
Speaking on the depression and thinking about harming yourself or somebody that has even tried to harm themselves, those numbers seem high to me. They always have in the past surveys we've done. Informally, if you all feel comfortable with it, how many of you know by hand somebody that has thought about harming themselves or hurting themselves or has harmed themselves? That's amazing.
I have a comment. I wanted to talk a little bit about the idea of wrong and kind of wrong, and I think I'd like to turn the conversation to what the actual physical effects are. I think wrong is like a judgment, and when you're actually hurting your body and your brain with drugs and alcohol. I think that's more the issue for these growing bodies and minds.
I have a couple of questions. One, if something like Alateen was offered at Monomoy, would you go for supporting a friend or yourself? And the other question that I have is, I've had a couple people comment to me that the survey isn't quote-unquote legit because a lot of kids make fun of it and mock it. So how do you assure that the results that you present are legit, for lack of a better word?
Sorry. So we were actually told today, because a lot of us had that same question, and I know that, at least in my opinion, I think that for the older, like 11th and 12th graders, I think that they take it a little more seriously because they know like the effects of what it actually does to your body. But like having such a young school and a young program, a lot of 8th graders take it as a joke, and that gets like passed on. But we were actually told today that if you there's like a couple questions that they ask you the same thing basically, and you kind of like, you kind of like contradict yourself if you are just messing it up or like just doing it as a joke. So it cancels out if you're lying basically. So most of the data is like very accurate, I'd say.
They would like to know what
So,
yeah.
so just to add on to that, so for every section of the survey, you kind of pick the question. If it's alcohol use or if it's sex, there will be, there's a few questions in each category, and it will say, have you had 5 or more drinks in a short period of time in the last 30 days? And one of the choices will be, I have not drank in the last 30 days, and then you have the how many times that you've done it, sort of scale that kids could bubble. Then you'll have another question that will say, have you ever used alcohol in the past, in your lifetime? And so they'll ask this, the same question 3 or 4 different times. And if the students are inconsistent with how they respond to, so if they're saying in one question that they don't use alcohol and they're saying in the other question that they binge drink every month, that gets kicked out. And there's a number on the front pages or the first couple pages on the validity slide that actually indicates how many surveys were just removed from the batch as not being reliable. I've actually gone through to do some of the slides on the parent messaging. I've gone through and actually looked and pulled out the data. So while the data is completely anonymous, I don't know who filled out what, we can see, boy, girl, and then how they responded to every single question. So, so we'll go grab how they responded to all the questions on alcohol, and it's amazing how consistent the students are, from question to question to question. So they're not saying one thing in one question and then turning around and contradicting themselves in the next.
And also, when it comes to statistics, yeah, there we go. All right, when it comes to statistics and really any survey, always take it with a plausible deniability for when it comes to each statistic. So it could be a small range outside and inside of where that true center lies. So yeah, just take it with a small grain of salt, but that's really it.
So Alateen.
I just had a question. As a parent of 3 kids in the high school here, and I also work for a neighboring district, I like to think at home we have a fairly good relationship with our kids, and but the majority of their time during the day is spent in school and with their peers. So I'm wondering if there's anything that you guys can think of that the school is not doing or could be more proactive to help with that whole depression and suicidal. Those numbers are alarming.
There was one slide in there talking about talking about connections with teachers and students, and I think that is something really important, but it cannot be forced. And I think something that a lot of teachers try to do is force those connections, but you can't build them in you can't build them in a week, and you can't build them during a class period. Because I have teachers that I will go to repeatedly. I have coaches that I talk to every day. And I think having that support system has kept me pretty sane during what is a crazy senior year so far. But I think a lot of people don't have their support system yet. And I think the teachers are forcing it, but the students aren't necessarily trying to find it or haven't found it yet. And it's just one of those things you can't force, but once they have them, hopefully that will help lower the numbers.
And then, sorry, oh my gosh. And then just going along with the at home, I know you, so obviously you have a great relationship with your kids. Like, yeah, you do, you're just but I think it's really important that you know your kids like that, and you know that what's inside their head. Like me personally, I have a great relationship with my parents. Shout out mom and dad, it's in the back. Hey. And we talk almost every night, and they ask me how school was, like what'd you learn, what'd you do, like just the little things that keep you connected, like tethered to your kid, like daily. That's what like builds their self-esteem and like builds their confidence.
Hello? A lot of the time it takes a certain, some students have a certain perception on talking to the teachers, parents. Some are more into themselves. They can't really share as well as others. Like, I know for me, starting high school, it was hard for me to open up to teachers genuinely. But then as I got older, I matured, I'm able to talk to them more, but I feel like for the younger kids, it's hard for them to make this next step without this fear of opening up and being more mature in a way that you can talk to someone and you can trust someone.
Going off what Maggie said, I didn't realize how many people didn't have family dinners. And I think that's also a key part when you're trying to make family connections and having a good family life.
I think just another part of it is that if you build this sort of idea with your kids, that if they do something and they're going to be in this enormous amount of trouble, then it's going to make them really scared to come to you about things. Like, if they know that they're going to get in a lot of trouble if they simply open up and talk to things, then it's going to drive them away and keep them more secretive about what they're doing. So an important factor in that is just knowing that, like, it's not the end of the world if you slip up one time.
And I think in addition to the adult and student connectedness, it's one thing to have the relationship, which is a crucial part of it, but if students aren't willing or they don't feel like they can make that connection, or if teachers assume they already have that connection, that's kind of a roadblock there, because students who are feeling those feelings of sadness and depression may not seek the help they need. So I think even though it's hard, teachers have so many students, they have to recognize the warning signs, like, hey, maybe they haven't turned in their work on time for a while, or they haven't really answered in my class, just kind of staying on the lookout for those types of things as well.
Also, when it comes to parent messaging, you kind of have to find that sweet spot between having an open dialogue and not being like too militant in your propaganda, I guess.
And then one of the other things that we're doing differently this year than we have in the past at Monomoy. We'll be borrowing from a really great thing that's been kind of quietly happening in the background of the middle school. So the middle school for the last several years has been administering a little survey that asks a question very similar to the one that's asked on this survey. It's asking, do you have a teacher at school who you can really go to if you need to talk about something important? And the students not only answer yes or no, they answer who it is. And we've discussed this summer as an admin team that we're a small enough school district. There's absolutely no reason why we can't do this in every one of our schools and identify the students who are saying they don't have somebody and look at how we can provide some supports behind the scenes so that they can feel connected. But it's also, I think, for the staff involved, it's one of the biggest things at the middle school each year to get the envelope. Here are the kids that say that they're closely connected to you. So we want to see that happening more in our district. And I think as the student presenter was sharing this slide on the connectedness that students feel with adults in the building. The thing that I strive for is that to see that level at high school over 80%, and we're not there. And we need to go and look at what we can do better. We do a lot of great things here, but we have lots of room for improvement too.
Kind of taking off from that, so in addition to teachers, there are a lot of other people that make your school kind of function in terms of custodians and people that work in the lunch line and coaches and assistant coaches and counselors. And so there are a lot of people that you could add to the list of adults you could talk to. But my question is going back to parents. And I get, our message is really important to you in terms of your behavior, but how do our behaviors speak to you? So if we're drinking and if we're smoking weed, but we're telling you you can't do that, how does that land?
Well, I mean, there's a difference because you guys are all of age and we're not. So in that sense, I feel like it's kind of a different type standard where you guys have more privileges because you're older than us and we have to, subside by those rules.
I think personally, what I think other people may think, as in other students, I think in a rebel type mentality, people might think oh, you're telling me not to do this, but you're doing this. So I think that's going to make them want to rebel more and be oh, well, if you can do it, I can do it. And like what Connor said, I think that since it's legal, I think that's made a big difference. Since parents can do it, now kids are seeing their parents do it, and they think it's okay, so.
I hate to kind of get all sciencey here, but every day in my psychology class, we are told that our brains are not fully developed until we are 25 years old. And I think that's something that, for me, that resonates with me, because you learn with a developing fetus, drugs, alcohol are really bad for it. But as we get older, we kind of lose that fact. And as we're developing these types of drugs, alcohol, that can affect us more than it's going to affect all of our parents who have fully developed brains and who, again, are of age to participate in those activities.
Sorry. I just think that, like how Connor said, you are all of age, and you have your own lives as well. And I think that you should be allowed to do and hang out with your other friends and drink or whatever you want to do. But I'd say keep that on your own time and lock away your liquor cabinet and just keep all of what you do because you're of age over there, and then your kids' lives and their importance over there.
I personally think, and I think everybody probably thinks it's a bad example, if you're like out to dinner with your family and your parents drink and then they drive, because that's not setting the right example for your children, because then they're going to think it's justified, even though it's not, because your parents obviously have a higher tolerance level, but that's like not the impression that students are like really thinking when they're out to dinner, because they're just seeing their parents just drink and then go drive. And like the last thing that I would ever want to see is one of my friends like drinking and driving. So like I feel like parents really need to press the fact and the scientific stuff that you cannot drink and drive or smoke and drive anything, because your vision, anything, everything's going to be impaired, and you really don't want to lose a life over something like that.
Hi, I just want to say congratulations to all of you for talk about this subject. But I want to back to the depression. I was very, very surprised the numbers, especially on girls. And I think, and the numbers in the vaping and alcoholic and girls. I think the depression is, the girls, I think they're trying to avoid the depression in using different kind of stuffs to release the whatever feelings they have. And you guys, I was young once and I never liked to talk to grown-ups. That was my thing. I never liked to talk to my teachers or my parents about anything like that. But I did like to talk with my friends. Do you guys, as a group, you guys encourage your peers to talk about those things?
I feel like many of us do talk to our friends about these sort of issues, and it's not so much that it's not getting spread from peer to peer, but that after it's spread from peer to peer, it's not spread from peer to adult, and that's sort of the main issue there, is we can tell our friends about it all we want, but they're probably not going to go and like tattle on us to an adult for doing something that's perceived as wrong.
I also feel like a big part of it is that your friends like aren't educated in like what you're going to talk to them about. So like even if you think your friends are helping you, and if you're like suffering from like severe depression, like it really would be good to go see a therapist. And like I wouldn't force your kid to go see a therapist, but I'd certainly just like bring it up and just like bring them to an appointment with you, just so they can like talk, because like you're just gonna like talk to a person that you don't really know, so you know they're not like gonna go and tell other people. And I don't know, I just feel like it would help people deal with everything, even anxiety, because like we're all under so much pressure. So like anxiety and depression go hand in hand, I know for most high school students. So I really think going and seeing a therapist, besides just talking to your friends, because as much as your friends can help, you do need somebody educated who can help you with coping mechanisms that are healthy, instead of going and drinking or smoking and just trying to push it off.
I think also that students talk to their friends about it, and that can be a good thing to have a support system, but there's also the converse of that. If you're upset or you're engaging those risky behaviors, it's very likely that your friends are too. And when you surround yourself with those types of people and those mentalities, obviously from the belief slides, we see that does make an impact, and that does affect students' usage and how they feel and perceive themselves.
Along with that, I think that some students also, like, if you're relying on your friends all the time, they also have things in their life and they're trying to help themselves, and like, they always are, I know a lot of people at Monomoy like put others before themselves, and like that is an awesome thing, but they also need to put themselves first and like seek help if needed.
I was just curious the amount of counselors that you have at the high school that are available to the kids during the day.
Do you want to answer, or do you want me to?
And I guess, and do they know how to access those counselors?
I'm going to speak from a little bit of a personal experience. I am pretty close with my guidance counselor and Miss Police. She's assistant softball coach, so I have been exposed to these people a lot, and I know sometimes that I need a break from everything, and so I'll go, and if they're not busy, I'll talk to them. And I know a lot of my friends, as the years have gone on, they've developed a relationship with their guidance counselor. I know there is our school psychologist, who we have 2 of them who can talk to students if needed, but those are not really the people that people will talk to sometimes. They'll go to their teachers, they'll go to, it's who they're comfortable with. So I know some people may not be comfortable with their guidance counselor yet, getting to know them, but it's all who they're comfortable with and who they can open up to. And I've known teachers who have like blocked times off just to talk to certain students who need that little.
In addition to the 3 guidance counselors and school psychologists we have, there's also other people, and they're not always teachers. Like Officer Clark is standing in the back. I see him every day in the library. He's amazing. 4 guidance counselors, my apologies. And of course, Mr. Burke is my guidance counselor, but pretty close to Mr. Bennett too. I always hear him cheering at the games. It's good to see him around.
Along with our 4 guidance counselors, one of them is our 8th grade guidance counselor, Miss Burton, and she's also our peer leads teacher, which was also a great opportunity for us, like older kids who never had her as a guidance counselor. So it's a great connective piece that we can connect with the 8th graders that she has, and she can guide us to helping them.
Just like a shout out to Ms. Barton, because even though she wasn't our 8th grade guidance counselor, I'd say probably everybody here sitting on this panel, Ms. Barton has like helped us every single day in school. She always stops and talks to us, asks us if we need anything, but she knows like not to force it. Like she knows like if we're doing something, then she'll be like, okay, like have a good day. But I do think Ms. Barton has changed all of our lives for the better, just from this person.
I was just gonna say, adding on to what Julie said, when I walked in 8th grade year, I had Miss Police as my guidance counselor, and she was super accommodating. Like everything that I wanted, she fit into my schedule, and same with Miss Kennedy, who's my current guidance counselor. And it's just kind of like the teacher relationship, student relationship, right off the bat that I felt like I was being heard and I was being understood even as an 8th grader. So I think that's a really good thing that Monomoy offers.
I just want to add one thing to what I said. I know for a while I always viewed all the kind of administrative guidance counselors, guidance department as pretty intimidating. But through my 5 years here, I've really realized that they are some of the nicest people I've ever met. And like Mr. Burkhead, he makes it a goal to know every student's name. And I think that's really awesome. It helps create kind of a communal sense. I make jokes with Officer Clark in the library every morning. I think it's just a really great community we have here, and I think that it's important for you all to know that they may be scary, but they're people, and they are some of the nicest people I have ever met.
Along with what Julie said about Mr. Burkhead saying hi to everyone in the hall, he knows everyone's name, which is awesome. Yeah. And also the guidance counselors, even if you don't have them, they'll know your names. And I think that's a great thing about the small community that we have, and we really taken a stand, and we just, I don't know, it's like nice walking into guidance and having not my guidance counselor like know my name, like Mr. Bennett, Mr. Burke, and my guidance counselor and all the administrators know my name. And I think that's a good connection to have, along with Officer Clark always making fun of me in the library.
Another thing, Sarah mentioned Mr. Burkhead. A couple years back, Mr. Burkhead made the point to the school. He said, over the summer, I learned everybody's name. Something I want to mention about Mr. Burkhead, as many of you know, I have a twin sister. Mr. Burkhead is the only teacher or staff member I've had who's never gotten us mixed up. And it amazes me. He really does, like, commit to know.
One weighs the hair on the other side, Caitlin, you wear it on the left.
He's committed. He's committed.
Just to go back to support structures and those greater trends of depression, which a lot of you guys seemed worried about, these are larger, nationwide issues. We're at record highs for anxiety and depression, and among adults, we're at record lows for, starting a family, moving to a new town, different things like that. So these are larger trends, and it isn't just pronounced here, you know, it's across the nation. So not to worry less about it, but understand that it's a more systemic issue.
Sorry, just adding one more thing. This is gonna sound corny, but like our motto is like home away from home and you are important, and we have a bunch of slogans around the school. Like there's a big like mural word thing above the stairs that says you are important. And it's like you can tell that like you are important and that this is a home away from home just by like the community and everyone in the building. So even if it doesn't seem like that, and like people make jokes like home away from home, like 620 card, like it's all true. It's really accurate. And just another person who is really supportive, Miss Gilmet, our AD. Yeah, me and Sarah are the student ambassadors, and we worked all last year with Miss Gilmet, and she's so accommodating. We could go to her with our problems and talk about anything. So it's like all around the school.
I have a question about the bullying slide. With tensions in this country being what they are, has any of the bullying, in your opinion, crossed racial lines? And if so, how is it being addressed?
I think that just not necessarily even in our school, but everyone has an opinion, and whether they choose to keep it to themselves or openly express it, it's dealt with. They're told to keep their opinions to themselves, and there's, like we've been told since we were kids, if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything. So I think that's a message that we all pretty much carry on throughout our entire lives. And like in movies, you see people getting pushed up against lockers and yelled at and made fun of in school, and I've never seen that here. So
I think although it is a rarer case when you see those race-focused bullying issues, that when you do see those, you have to say something, because it's always much bigger than that one incident. It's how we address it and how that builds as a culture. So if you can, as a culture, say that it's wrong, then more people will believe it. And that's kind of, it has to be a joint effort to really stop that. So everyone has to do their part.
I've got a question. No one's talking about texting and driving, but it's 6 times more likely to cause an accident than alcohol. So what are we doing there? What are we doing wrong? Where are we learning to text and drive? Is it just a societal item?
Personally, growing up, my parents, I've never seen them text and drive, but I have seen my friends' parents text and drive, and like, they didn't grow up with it, so I don't know how they've become so good at it. I don't know, because they like grew up with like flip phones and they had to like go through all the numbers, but they've just become like so accustomed to it that like they don't even need to look at the phone and they can still drive. But then I think that same thing with the drunk driving, like it's giving the wrong impression to us that are getting our permits and our licenses, that once we are in the car alone and our parents not watching over our shoulder, that we can go on our phone, but it is going to cause a car accident. And once again, that's not, like, you don't want to go that way. Like, it's just not the right way to die.
I think you're right about just a societal thing in general. Once again, it comes down to vaping versus, you know, traditional cigarettes. It takes a while for these things to come out and ad campaigns to start, and these anti-smoking things, you know, like, they're still going on to this day, like these ad campaigns and like the DARE program and things like that. So I think we're probably going to see that in the next like 20 to 30 years when it comes to texting and driving or whatever the next thing is for, you know, internet communication.
Okay, personally, I think that as a middle schooler and as an elementary schooler, I wasn't really informed about how dangerous texting and driving could be, because like as humans we're so emotionally like tethered to these little like computers that we can take anywhere, and I didn't really know, because I just recently got my license. And now I'm like seeing how much of a bigger deal it is with texting and driving and how distracted, like, because you have to have all your focus on the road. So I'm like starting to see that, and I think that maybe if we like warned our kids, like maybe like before they were getting their permits, or like maybe starting in high school, just so they know like it's not the healthy or like better alternative, I guess.
Like, I remember when I got my permit and I first started driving, my parents either wouldn't let me bring my phone into the car, or they would have me put it in the glove compartment. So from there on, I either keep my phone in the passenger seat, but like, there's like a thing like when you're driving, like somehow like your phone will know you got your license, and they'll like turn on like the car driving mode, so it's like no notifications, nothing will come through. Even if it's an emergency, like nothing comes through when you're driving. So like, I feel like that's a big thing, is that you want to like make sure you have your phone on Do Not Disturb, powered off all the way, because if it's like dinging, like you're going to want to check it, and I know most people aren't going to pull over to go check it, so it's just better to have it off.
Along with that, I think that a lot of parents aren't tech savvy. My parents are always asking me like what to do. Sorry, you guys are just really bad with it. I mean, every day it's like they mess up the apps all the time, but I have the Do Not Disturb on while driving, and that's really easy to do. It's rating settings, and I'm sure any kid would put it on for their parent if they needed it, or if the parents could find it in settings, the parents could put it on for the kids. Along with Life 360, which is an app that helps with speeding, and you get a notification if your kid is speeding or like texting and driving or calling. So I think that like along with like the phone being in the car, there's also benefits because you can have apps that can stop that and prevent it.
I think also like people say, oh, like, or they think they can text and drive just because they've done it before, but like of course that's going to come to an end at some point. But I think it's most important to prevent that like from coming before you have to face real consequences, and like your friends need to tell you to stop. Like, you hear it from parents so much that it's falling on deaf ears, but when your friends say it and they stop you from doing it, I think that's more meaningful to kids to hear.
I see a lot more of people using the voice texting features on their phones than people actually physically picking up their phones and typing words. And I think that for some reason they just think that that's safer to speak into your phone and have it type it for you, when in reality it's just as dangerous because your attention still isn't completely on driving. So if you're focusing like on anything more than that, then it's equally as dangerous.
About 2 years ago, or maybe it was last year, I don't really know, but an organization like came to our school and did a whole, for seniors and juniors, they did a whole like, this is like a simulation of like what you would be doing, like texting and driving, and how distracted you can actually get. Like they have you like sitting down driving a car, and like there's a phone in your hand or something, and like every time it dings you have to look at it. And I think like I personally didn't partake in it because I was only a sophomore or like a freshman or something, but like seeing how kids like were actually doing it, and they're like, wow, like this is actually kind of hard, like they didn't really know about it either, so it was like, I think that was a good thing.
You've been so helpful, I think, to those of us who have come tonight. I'm wondering if you were given the opportunity to make a public service announcement to the parent community that couldn't be here tonight, and in that announcement speak about the one most important thing that you think that we in the parent community could do to help you and your peers get through all of these issues at this stage of your life, the one behavior we could demonstrate, the one thing, the one most important message you'd like to deliver to the parent community to be a help to you getting through this stage of life, what would that message be?
I think the best quality a parent could show would be acceptance. That note, kind of, if your kid makes a mistake, they can come to you and they'll help you with it instead of worrying about the consequences of it, and just accepting them for who they are, what challenges they face, and working together to solve those issues.
Open a dialogue.
Basically, what I'm saying is both of those, but connections, like as many connections as you can make with your children, like make them, because it'll help like tremendously.
Along with what Maggie's saying, connections is definitely like the key to having a good relationship with your parents. I know my mom is like very attached to me. Like she says she's gonna come and basically live with me in college, which kind of scares me, but I think that the connections is like very important. I think it's great to have a good connection with your parents, and I think it's one of the most important things for a team.
Hi, I'm going to ask for your help now. So I have an 8th grader here, and it's a little intimidating to have your little one in high school. And so you were talking about having relationships with parents. What can I do if I start to see my son starting to hang out with people that I don't want him to be hanging out with because I'm getting a sense of some things? What advice would you have for me to try to steer away from the peer group that I wouldn't want him to be with?
I'd say if you haven't already, sit them down, tell them that, like, obviously your kids are gonna experience its life. Like, everyone, like, you've all tried things. And yes, like, after 21, obviously. But, like, just how you, like, make the connection with them. Again, I'm talking about connections. But it's just kind of, like, telling them, like, hey, I know it's high school, I know it's intimidating, I know people, like, there's peer pressure, there's everything, like, everything's being thrown at you at once. But just so you know, like, I'm here for you, and I want you to be comfortable with if things are coming and you know that it's making you uncomfortable, you know that it's probably not the right decision, that you can come talk to me about it. And, like, we can, like, talk to someone, we can, like, tell you the effects, like, just, like, providing a system, I think.
I guess the typical answer would be, or a question would be like, if you know personally that these people that your child is associating with are inherently dangerous or, you know, something like that, and just taking that with discretion, but also at the same time asking your child, you know, like to take a removed sort of third person position and asking them if those are the people that they really want to associate with and thinking of their future. You know, just sort of like staging an intervention, I guess.
I also know that as a peer leads group, we've been trying to reach out to the 8th graders. So if he like ever needs somebody to talk to and he like doesn't feel comfortable talking to like an adult, he can come to any of us and we can like help him with anything like he's having problems with. Yeah. And like, yeah, we have F-Block peer leads, so like, all of our names were on that presentation that's going to be posted, so he can feel free to reach out to any of us and we can help him with any problems that he's having. If he's like scared that if he doesn't have these friends, then he may not have any friends, we will be his friend. We will be there for him, we will help him find a good group of friends and the support system that he needs.
Another thing with having good friends is I think that it's really important to stay active in like the school community. I don't have time to do any bad activities like drinking or smoking because I'm so active. I play 2 sports and I'm in many clubs, and I think that's key also to staying out of trouble, is knowing that you have your like all your activities and extracurriculars to do.
I think also, instead of just saying like who you can't hang out with, just make sure you've instilled a strong sense of self into your kid and that they feel empowered and confident enough to recognize that they themselves and say they don't need people who are harmful to them. So that they can kind of feel good enough about themselves to surround themselves with people who are good for them.
I think since we've been in the high school, we learn a lot about different learning styles and styles of learning and how each individual student perceives information best. And I think it sort of depends on the kid, because for some kids you can just tell them what their actions will lead to and that's enough for them, but others need to feel it and see it and experience it. So, and others like a disciplinary kind of relationship where if you tell them not to do something and you explain to them why and like the consequences of it, then they're going to take that seriously. So it kind of just depends on the student and how you perceive the message.
I'm gonna speak from experience. High school friendships change every year. I was friends with people in 8th grade that I thought I'd be friends with forever, and I don't talk to them anymore. And part of it was realizing that those friendships weren't good for me. And I think part of it was my relationship with my parents. I'd come home every day and I'd tell them every single detail about my day, even if they did not care what I was learning about in this class or what I ate for lunch because they made it for me that morning. But even telling them about the friend drama, what was going on, they would always kind of hint. They wouldn't tell me what to do, but they kind of hint me in the right direction, and it was kind of on me to take that further step. But I kind of realized it was for the better. It was bad at the moment, but as I got through it, it's been a lot better. So hopefully that can work for you.
Well, along with what Julie said about the parent connections, your parents are always like a step in front of you are, and they always know what you should do, but sometimes they may not say it like Julie said, maybe they're hinting at it. And I know that when I don't listen to my parents, I always end up making not the wrong mistake, but the mistake that I wish I hadn't made. And I know that now that I wish I listened to my parents before, because they always know what's up. And I think that's what a lot of teens don't like listening to their parents. They think it's cool not listening to their parents, but honestly, parents are always right, and I hate to admit that, but
What clock will you be there tomorrow?
So I have a question again. So it seems that you all are pretty much on the same page as, and this goes back to 40 years ago when I was your age, that's how old I am. Communication is the key, and having that line of communication with your parents or caregivers, whoever you have. And that hasn't changed. And I think you have to keep that line of communication open. That leads to my one remark that I say, I've been to 3 of these now, I don't know, Mr. Carpenter's going to get mad at me, but I am still very disappointed as a parent and a citizen of this town that we have how many students now in the school, and this is all we have for the parents that are here. That speaks volumes to why certain numbers are there and why the communication is not there. Somehow we got to do something to get more people to see this presentation. I know we're going to put it online, I know we're going to send out emails, but we almost have to make it a mandatory thing somehow. That's just my final thought on it. I don't mean to put you on the spot, Mr. Carpenter, but I want to see more parents here and involved.
As would I. And you know, I think I was talking, I don't know if it was Tommy or Bill before this, but I think the sad reality of, now I think this is the 10th time that I have been involved with a youth risk behavior survey presentation between the 2 districts I've been with. And the only time we had a big house was in my school district off Cape. And unfortunately it was on the heels of tragedy. And I think what pains me is, that a lot of the things that are addressed in there, be it binge drinking or texting and driving or drinking and driving, it can be life and death for our kids. And the reality is that the police go and knock on your door, and then they're giving Bill and I a call late at night to let us know that we've lost someone. And my hope is that that things change and that things get better before we're in that situation. And we've been lucky. Since I've been here, we haven't lost one of our students. to one of these risks, but it's not a if, it's a win ultimately when it comes to communities. And so I hear you, Dave, and I appreciate the comment. And my want is to go and see us have a big house of people and to have the conversation be one that we can all, as a community, go and move forward together. But I would like to go and give one of our students a chance to go and say, or let you know what the experience was like for students today, because they heard a version of this presentation during class or during the school day.
Yeah, so about 2 weeks ago, Dr. Carpenter and Ms. Police came into our peer leads class and pretty much told us that they want us to present this data to our peers because our peers would respond better to us giving it instead of listening to Dr. Carpenter, Mr. Burkhead, or Ms. Police talk about it. And we were given 100 slides, and we basically went up. We were not going to put our entire school into this auditorium and make them sit through the presentation we made you guys sit through. Because some of it's not relevant to them, and they're going to lose interest. So we decided to, section by section, break it down to about 3 or 4 slides and create a video presentation for the students. So that's what our peer leads class has been working on the past 2 weeks. We worked with Mr. Cass in our TV production studio to film like 20-minute long video that was shown during JOSM hour today. Every student was required to go to their advisory class, which is a class with about 10 or so kids in it. So they watched the video, and then there was a discussion that was held, which helped it be very one-on-one between students and teachers. And then we spent our class periods preparing for tonight. We practiced the full presentation, and then we even did some mock questions with Ms. Burton today in class, and they mirrored a lot of questions that you all asked us today. And we realized that keeping the conversation going is what's important, but this forum would not have been possible if we had done it with every student in our school sitting in this auditorium with the time we had. So that was how we presented it to every student. And if you're here, I recommend talking to your student about it, see what they thought, and if they have any questions, I mean, we were all in the video. You can tell them to always come to us and reach out to us, and we can give some more information, and you all can share what you learned today.
I just thought, well, we have the students here. When you did all these slides and saw all these problems, was there anything that you felt like you had not been addressed in health class or SEL or something that maybe you thought we as a school could concentrate 1 or 2 areas better on?
As they sort of mentioned throughout the panel, we've been practicing this presentation for about a week and a half, 2 weeks. And when we broke off into smaller sections to discuss our individual topics, one of the things that we were asked is, are we familiar with the, like I had no idea what liquid incense were, which was like, that was just completely new information to me. So I think that just being familiar with everything and knowing what to look for can help a lot with overall prevention.
I remember personally, I did not get sexual education until I was in 10th grade, which I personally feel is too late, because then your kids aren't going to be educated on, because like, even in the presentation, like a lot of kids didn't even know if they were using a form of birth control, and like they didn't know if they got somebody pregnant, which is really scary, because you don't want to be in high school and get pregnant, you know. And also, we had increased rates of people drinking and doing drugs before they participated in sexual intercourse, which is something that really needs to be focused in on, is the whole consent component, and that people cannot give consent if they are under the influence. And I remember probably about 3 or 4 years ago, I was part of the teen task force, and they showed us this video, and they said, like, consent is as simple as tea. If you look it up on YouTube, it's like the same thing. You will find it, it's simple, but I would show your children it so they know exactly what consent is.
So I know we've had you here for almost 2 hours, and I appreciate the time that you gave us for the parents and for our folks in public safety, and I cannot express my gratitude enough to our peer leaders who had the courage to talk about things that I know when I was 16, 17, 18 years old could have never done at a forum like this. So thank you. I just want to give Ms. Jordan a quick chance to plug a thing that on vaping.
Hi there, Joy Jordan. I'm the Community Engagement Coordinator for the district. One of the things that we have been planning is a parent university on vaping, which ties in nicely to some of the results that were in the survey. It's October 23rd, right here, 6 p.m. And we'll have an expert from the Barnstable County Department of Human Services help educate parents and caregivers about what vaping looks like, the signs you want to look for, what the equipment looks like, all that stuff that some of us older folks aren't familiar with. And then hopefully by the end of this year, we're also going to work with Sheila House and the Harwich Youth Services Department on doing a town hall session on underage drinking as well. So keep an eye out for information on that, because we want to start tackling these issues as the best we can from the parent education standpoint.
So thank you for coming. I will put this information up on the website, and Dave, we may go and make the 20-minute video that all the students saw mandatory for parents, otherwise they'll lose their JAWSOM privileges. But I appreciate the conversation, and I'm welcome to stay around afterwards and talk with anybody who wants to stay too. Thank you.